Marinero, the Sick Podcast, and today's guest brought to you by Memo.me, the Canadian marketplace for personalized video messages from your favorite athletes and celebrities. For any occasion, use the code SICK at checkout for 10% off on video messages. Some examples of celebrities available on Memo.me are hockey legends Wendell Clark and Cassie Campbell-Pascal, the Toronto Raptors play-by-play broadcaster Jack Armstrong, as well as today's guest, Jay Onrait. How you doing, bud?
Great, Tony. How are you?
Extremely well. First time for me that I have a chance to chat with you. I never thought it would be with you driving, but hey, I got to admit, this is pretty cool.
It's pretty awesome, actually. I'm keeping my eyes on the road. I'm making sure I'm following all the rules of the road here. But yeah, I'm actually heading to TSN right now. I live downtown, and TSN's up in Scarborough, so it's about a 30-minute drive or so. So yeah, we'll just chat. We'll chat during my commute. It'll be great.
All right, as long as I know you got your eyes on the road, so that's cool. I'm happy to get the chance to chat with you. There's so much going on. I think we're going to start here in Montreal, where at the time of this recording on a Tuesday night, it was 24 hours ago, or more than 24 hours ago. It was on Monday night at around 5:15 p.m. that we found out that the Montreal Canadiens had two players on the NHL's COVID-19 protocol list. The game last night was canceled versus the Edmonton Oilers. I reported earlier this morning that out of the two players, it's only one that actually tested positive for COVID on Monday. The other was placed on the list as a precautionary move. All Montreal Canadiens staff were tested earlier this morning before 9 a.m. And by the time all the results came out and they met with the National Hockey League at around 4:30 later on this afternoon and had their conference call, right after that, it was announced that the players are still on the COVID-19 protocol list, and the Montreal Canadiens will have another 3 games postponed this week. They were supposed to play Edmonton on Wednesday, Edmonton on Friday, and Ottawa on Sunday. All 3 games at the Bell Center. So those 3, plus yesterday's game at the Bell Center, have now been postponed. Jay, when the heck are they going to make up these 4 games?
That's the question I asked Darren Dreger last night, and he pointed out that there's such a tight window here because, as you know, Tony, the schedule is packed as it is. These teams are playing 4 games a week as it is. So I think his thoughts, and this is pretty early in the discussion, is that the makeup games would happen after the so-called end of the regular season. So, at this point, everything's kind of fluid. We should say that it's pretty remarkable that the entire North Division has gone this long without having to postpone games, but you knew it was probably going to happen at some point. It's unfortunate it happened to the Canadiens, and yet, here we are. This is the reality of the pandemic that we're living in. We'll forge ahead. They'll get those games played. I think it's a situation where if I was a betting man, I would think that they would tack them on at the end of the season as best they could.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. Jay, the season ends on the 8th of May, I believe, which is a Saturday. And right. if it's not the 8th, it's the 9th. But anyway, it's one of the two. I don't know which day falls on the Saturday. But the Canadiens actually host the Edmonton Oilers on Monday, April 5th. And then a couple of nights after that, they'll play 2 games versus the Ottawa Senators. Maybe because Edmonton will be flying to Montreal on Sunday the 4th. Maybe they end up playing the Canadiens on the 5th, add a game on the 6th. Maybe the Canadiens and the Oilers will end up playing when the Canadiens and the Senators are scheduled. Or maybe the Canadiens will play the Oilers once and then they add them on. All to say, though, back to what you said, you'd have to think, Jay, pretty smart people running the league, that they probably gave themselves a buffer and said, okay, you know what? We'll end the season on the 8th or the 9th, but if we have to add 2 or 3 weeks, we can, and we still can get the playoffs in, and we could still get them over with by a pretty good deadline.
And that's exactly it, Tony. You nailed it. Whether they actually have built that in or not, we don't know for sure. We assume that, but the important thing to the league is when the Stanley Cup is awarded, right? They want to award the Stanley Cup, as close to the regular time as they possibly can to try to reset next season on time like it would normally be played. And that's the big priority for the NHL right now. So you made a great point. You know, there's going to be some gaps in the schedule, or maybe they can sneak in one of those games against Edmonton that got postponed. And that would obviously help at the end. You don't have to make up 3 or 4 games. You only have to make up 2. That helps, obviously. So, I think it's, you know, you got to feel for the schedule makers now, right? Because everything was going pretty well after some tough stuff at the beginning of the season with Dallas and teams like that. So you have to feel, but they knew that this is a possibility, not even a possibility, Tony. They knew this is a probability going into this thing when they didn't go into the bubble. So in some ways, you have to almost be impressed with the fact that it hasn't happened before this and that it hasn't been worse. So we'll see how it all plays out for sure. But I still think the NHL is very much on track to get that Stanley Cup awarded in June like usual.
Yeah, well, they usually awarded mid-June. Last year, obviously, they didn't because they ended up restarting with the play-in August. So they awarded that Stanley Cup at the end of September. This year, it's going to have to be later than mid-June. You'd have to think, because if they end up adding a couple of weeks, then all of a sudden, you're probably going to end up starting the playoffs at the end of May. So it'll be later than mid-June. But even, you know what, even at that, Jay, going forward, don't you think the Stanley Cup has to be awarded before June 1st? I mean, I just find it kind of odd that you're playing the Stanley Cup final and some people are going to Dairy Queen to have an ice cream.
I agree with you. Or worse, from a television view perspective, people are at their cottages, cabins, and camps, and they're kind of done with hockey. You know, the thing about our country, our summer is so short, even the most hardcore hockey lovers, I think, would agree with you, Tony. I think they would agree that June 1, playing hockey in June in general just seems odd. It has always seemed odd to me ever since they've been doing it. I love your idea, and I think there's so many people out there. I know Pierre LeBrun recently wrote about it, that there's got to be, as you said, somebody to get the cup awarded by June 1st. We'll see. You know, we'll see how it goes. It's tough. The NHL schedule, with normal situation, it's not a pandemic. It's like the Titanic. Trying to change it would be very difficult, especially if you're adding another team in Seattle. But I agree with you. Ending the season before June 1 would be absolutely incredible for the league, I think.
It's the Sick Podcast. I'm Tony Marinaro. He's Jay Onrait. And the Sick Podcast is brought to you by MyBookie. Use code SickPicks for a 50% deposit bonus. Bet, win, get paid. Jay, hockey under these circumstances is better than no hockey at all. There's no doubt about it. But I never thought I'd say this because I was looking forward to the Canadian division. I'm kind of bored of seeing the same teams over and over again. Probably bored is not the right word because the hockey has been exciting. But the fact that the schedule is becoming redundant. Take a look. This week, the Canadiens were to play the Edmonton Oilers 3 times. Next week, the Ottawa Senators 4 times. And then Edmonton again. That would have been like 2.5 weeks of playing the same teams and playing them 8 times. I can't wait for them to go back to the old divisions, Jay.
I actually like it. I really like it. And I like it because it's given, I think, all hockey fans across this country a chance to really see these other Canadian teams. And I mean really see them. So the example I always use is Adam Lowry in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
So Winnipeg's a team. Montreal play a couple times a year, and the fans in Montreal might see them once a year. And you know, you're concentrating on all their players, your Scheifele's, your Wheelers, your Pierre-Luc Dubois. And what this schedule, I think, has allowed us to do is see just how great some of the players on these teams are. And I always use Adam Lowry as an example because he's one of my favorite players in the league, and any team would obviously love to have him as their third-line center. Some would probably love to have him as their second-line center. I just think that I like it. To me, the games mean more, matter more. Would you rather see Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl 4 times over the next 2 weeks, or would you rather see Sebastian Aho and the Carolina Hurricanes 4-10. To me, it's a no-brainer. But I understand your point about the redundancy. You wish it wasn't 4 games in a row all the time. You wish it wasn't 3 games in a row all the time. I think that's a very good point you make there. But for what it is, I think the hockey has been terrific and very exciting. And obviously they'll go back to the old divisions. I think I know that there are some owners, Mark Chipman in Winnipeg. There's one other I can't remember who are really pushing Gary Bettman for more all Canadian matchups. I would be in favor of that, certainly.
Yeah.
You know, if there was a way to, you know, allow us to have more than just because, you know, you think about the Western Canadian teams coming out to Montreal for 1, maybe 2 road trips tops.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like enough, and especially going the other way out west where I grew up. You know, people used to wait for the Habs to come out, wait for the Leafs to come out. They were so desperate to see them, and they only came out twice, you know, so you didn't always get a chance to see them. And the season ticket holders would absolutely always sell their tickets to the Toronto expats and the Montreal expats because they could triple or quadruple their money out there, which is why there's always more Habs fans, Leafs fans than Oilers or Wings fans in those buildings every time. I would love to see more all-Canadian matchups, but I've enjoyed it, I have to say, Tony. I really enjoyed the hockey, and other than Ottawa, where you still can see some promise, you know, every team has had flashes this year. You know, every team since Montreal started out like a house on fire. I love the moves Bergevin made. You know, Ottawa, they've had their struggles, but then you see where they're very promising. They've got some promising young players. Obviously, the Leafs are good. They've struggled lately. Winnipeg, good. Edmonton's been fantastic lately. And Calgary's kind of a weird outlier. You know, you thought by adding Markstrom that was the final piece for them. I certainly thought that. I loved that move. But, you know, I just thought that was a brilliant move of adding Tanev. And for whatever reason, they're just not – offensively, they're just not clicking. I can't understand it. And then, you know, you realize how much they missed Markstrom at first, but now that Demko's picked it up, they haven't missed a beat, and they might start to challenge for a spot as well. So, the Canadian teams, for the most part, 6 out of 7 in pretty good shape.
Marinero, the Sick Podcast, you can follow on Instagram and on Facebook at the Sick Podcast. Like it and share it with your friends. With Jay Onrait, you know what I do like about the schedule? I'll tell you this is, and I hope we see more of this, to make the travel easier on the players. Now, I've been a proponent for the longest time of actually having less games than the 82. I'd love to bring it down to 70. I understand why they don't. It's all about, you know, gate revenue and more games and TV revenue and all that stuff. I get it. I still would like to see 70 games and you make up that revenue by having sponsorship, by having sponsors, logos on jerseys, helmets, socks. I don't care. I think less games, better the product. But if they don't go there, the one thing that they've done this year that I do like is if Montreal plays Toronto and Toronto, or they play Edmonton and Edmonton, or whoever, having both games there, like on a Thursday and a Saturday, or even a Friday, Saturday, so you don't have to travel from one city to another. You're there, you play a couple of games. I think it intensifies rivalries. And easier travel makes it easier on the bodies. Easier on the bodies should end up giving you more productive athletes.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think probably you would hope that the fact that this season where you've had, you know, Montreal and Edmonton scheduled to play 3 games in a week, and every team in the Canadian division scheduled to play multiple games against each other, and yes, it's ramped up the intensities to a perfect level, but nothing's gotten out of hand, right? Because that's today's NHL, right? I mean, fighting's still there, and if anything, fighting sort of increased this year. But it never gets to a point where you're afraid for the players, you know, to be in the same city for 3 days or anything like that. So I like it a lot, Tony. So I'm just going to merge onto the 401. I could just keep going and I could drive to Montreal on this road. I could just keep driving for 5 hours and I'd be in your studio. It wouldn't be bad, actually. Now, one small problem, I missed my show, but
I hear you.
Yeah, what do you do? But yeah, I like your idea. a lot. One of the reasons the NFL, I know, other than just the product is great, one of the reasons I think the NFL is such a juggernaut is it's a concise schedule and it's easy to digest. It's one day a week, basically. Obviously, they play Thursday and Monday now, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's so concise, but I think especially now, I love you to go to 70, and I think maybe they might have entertained it pre-pandemic. Now I think they'll be looking to make up all this debt as any way they can. They might even want to add games at this point.
I hear you. Hey, what happens this year if the Leafs get knocked out of the first round of the playoffs again?
What a great question. Oh, man, I don't know. I think right off the top, I guess you probably have to fire the GM, which seems really harsh.
Wow.
I think he's done a terrific job, but I think you probably have to do it because can you honestly fire the coach again? They just fired the coach, so I don't know that you can necessarily do that. Or maybe they just stay the course. Maybe they stay the course if they're gone in the first round and you chalk it up to another first round failure. But the one thing with the Leafs, all the things that people said about them in the postseason, they don't have grit. They don't have, as my colleague Darren Detishin says, they don't have jam. They've got that now, like they've got Wayne Simmons and they've got Bogosian and they've got guys who can get dirty and muck it up a little bit. Do they have enough of those guys to go, toe to toe with Bruins or Flyers? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. We won't find out this year because they're not going to be playing those teams early on. I always think of them playing Eastern Conference teams. But yeah, it's a great question, Tony. I just think they're so fragile here. I mean, I know every Canadian fan base is fragile. We talk about certain ones being fragile, and there's not. No, we're all fragile, right? We're fragile sports fans, but no one's more fragile than this Leafs bunch, and especially because Tony, you see the potential for this team to actually win it all, right? You see it.
Yeah,
there.
of course. Yeah.
And that's tantalizing and terrifying for Leafs Nation at the same time, because to actually have a team, there's no excuses anymore, right? I mean, everyone's getting on the goaltender.
Yeah.
But he hasn't been good in the playoffs, but he's been great in the regular season up until this season for whatever reason. So we'll see. It'd be interesting if they decided to add another goaltender at the deadline or whatever. But again, the other problem is the cap situation, right, Tony? It's going to remain that for the next few years. They've got to pay back all this money. It's going to be kind of a disaster. So they've got guys signed to long-term deals. It doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room. The stuff that Bergevin did in the summer, not many teams were able to make those kinds of moves, and the Leafs are in a tight cap situation. So, I'm going to say it. I could actually see the GM getting fired if they didn't get past the first round.
Wow, I'd be surprised, but you're closer to the situation, obviously, living in Toronto than I am living in Montreal. But look, I want to ask you this last question, and that is, look, if the Leafs win the Cup, obviously everything will be worth it. But today, March 23rd, 2021, if you were the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs, would you do a do-over on the John Tavares signing, yes or no?
Another great question, and I think probably the answer would have to be yes, because if you could take that $11 million per, and you could find a center in the $6 million mode, a la Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and you could find a goalie in the $5 million, $6 million mode, a la Jake Markstrom. Jordan Binnington just signed for $6 million.
Yeah.
Is that maybe money better spent? I think it might be. But it's easy to say that. I mean, the one thing about the Tavares signing was it was symbolic. It was symbolic, Tony. It was symbolic because it was the point where it was the tipping point for kids who grew up in this area to say, I want to return to play in this area. Mike Camilleri, you remember when Mike Camilleri went to the Habs?
Of course.
And he was looking at the Leafs and the Habs, and in the end, you know, I know what he was thinking. He was thinking, I'm from here. I'm from Toronto.
Yeah.
I'm here in the off season. I hear enough from my family, friends, neighbors, old buddies about the Leafs. I don't need to be here all year round to be inundated with that. I'll go to Montreal where I'll be left alone, which is amazing to think that you go from one incredible market to another like that. But my point is that, you know, Stamkos all those years ago, you know, people thought he was going to come back. Why would he ever leave Tampa, right? And obviously that was the right decision. But finally,
I wouldn't leave Tampa.
Right, me neither. And finally, in Tavares, you had a guy who was on an up-and-coming team and left that team to come home. And it was symbolic. It really was. It was really important, I think, to the fan base. For whatever reason, this season hasn't been incredible. But look at his numbers in the first two seasons. Like, he absolutely played up to the contract. No question about it, those first two seasons. You look at those numbers. He was great. But, yeah, your point is very valid that they've got a lot of high-end talent up front, and it seems like they could probably use a goaltender and maybe a center iceman who's a little cheaper. I mean, put it this way, let's bring it back. I love when we bring an interview back around to the, you know, like we come full circle. Let's just say Adam Lowry hit the market. The Jets aren't going to let that happen. But wouldn't you rather have Adam Lowry and say Jake Markstrom as opposed to John Tavares? Personally, I would, because I think that's a team. That's a team move. You know what I mean? I'm absolutely not saying Tavares is not as good of a player. Obviously, he's a better player than Lowry. He's twice as good of a player, obviously. Yeah. But just in terms of managing your assets, I think the Leafs, you know, are seriously concerned about their goaltending situation now. And, you know, if you could have gotten someone like a Markstrom, to me, I love that deal, that 6x6 deal that he and Binnington signed. That's manageable to me. I don't care how old Markstrom's going to be at the end of the deal. I just think that's a great signing for them. So, anyway, long rambling way of saying, yes, that's what I would personally do. But that's no knock on John Tavares. Just because he's having a rough patch, he's been great here for the first little bit.
We're talking hockey, but be it hockey or any sport, for your officially licensed sports apparel and more, go to sportbuffshop.com for all of that officially licensed sports apparel. Use code SICKHoodies15 for 15% off on all hoodies. I know my last question, I said it's the last one, but I have to ask this real last one before you go. Jay Onrait, the next Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup will be, and why?
I actually think it will be the Edmonton Oilers. And I just think it's because I think that this offseason they've got it. Now, there's a caveat to my answer.
Yes.
It's just they have the most high-end talent, and their issue is their defense going into the season, and now it looks like Darnell Nurse is turning into a legitimate number one defenseman.
Yeah.
Their goaltending situation is a major issue, obviously. Mike Smith is not a young guy. Mikko Koskinen is not a $4.5 billion goaltender.
No.
So if they're able to find someone, if they're able to trade for someone, then I think it's hard to deny the top-end talent. It's hard to deny the Crosbys, the Lemieux, the Gretzkys, and it would be hard to deny McDavid's. And by the way, Austin Matthews is, as high talent as you get as well. So I was tempted to say the Leafs, but
I was convinced you were going to say Winnipeg because they have Adam Lowry.
I know, I'm obsessed with the guy.
I noticed.
I'm trading Tavares for Lowry. I'm obsessed with the guy. But no, I think you look at Winnipeg, and on paper it seems like they should have the best chance, right? I mean, look, they have the deepest top three lines. Yeah. A great goalie. The best goalie, probably. You could definitely say the best goalie in the North Division. You could argue Carey Price. You could argue Jake Markstrom. But Hellebuck's
Hellebuck's the best in the North.
Right?
Yeah.
So they have the key pieces that should get them there. I love their coach. I love their culture.
Yeah.
I just worry about their D. I worry about their defense. If Bufflin was still there, if Trouba was still there, then, man, I think it's Winnipeg all the way. But they've lost some real horses back there.
Yeah.
The last couple of years. And you see poor Josh Morrissey's playing like, how long's the game? 60 minutes? He's playing like 70 at this point.
Yeah.
So, that's my only concern with Winnipeg. But on paper, I agree with you. I actually think Winnipeg should be the team to win it next. And that would be great. I'd love to see it.
Jay Onrait, I hope this was
obsessed with Adam Lowry.
yes, you are. Jay, I was wondering if you were related at one point, but Jay Onrait, I hope this was as fun for you as it was for me. And I want to thank Memo.me, the Canadian marketplace for personalized video messages from your favorite athletes and celebrities, and use code SICK at checkout for 10% off on video messages. So thanks to Memo.me, and thank you, Jay Onrait, for joining me on the Sick Podcast.
Tony, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, and all the best to you and your family. Hope you guys are staying safe. Take care.
Likewise. Be well. Be safe. Here you have it. Jay Onrait. I'm Marinero, the Sick Podcast on Facebook and Instagram at the Sick Podcast. See you, Jay.